Welcome back to the channel. So what we've got is our 350X 2.0. This is the second one I've been able to find. This is the one that dropped the valve. And so what I'm going to do is, I don't want to rush through this. I don't want to just fix the motor in one video and call it a day. This particular video, we're going to go over heads, things to look for, things to watch out for, in rebuilding this head. And I'm going to kind of give you some options. I'm going to tell you what I chose, how I chose it, and why I chose it. You know, it's not always a spark plug and a wire loose somewhere. Sometimes it's, you know, catastrophic failure that you've got to, you know, kind of find your way out of. And really, like any problem, is you got to find the problem, and then you've got to dig even deeper than whatever the problem is on the surface. In this case, this engine dropped a valve, but that was a result of a poorly set up valve train. And because that valve train was set up incorrectly, there was too much play or slop in the valve train, and the rockers were just slapping the top of the valves, and eventually it broke. And because of that, of course, the valve bent, and luckily the piston didn't, you know, when it hit the bottom of the valve, it just pushed it up out of the way and it stayed, and then the piston basically became a non-interference engine, which for us, or for me, was very lucky. That top of that valve could have come off and just created shrapnel and went everywhere in the engine, and we would have been looking at pistons and rods and cylinders, and it could even have been a whole new motor. But I rolled the dice, and I got really, really lucky that the valve bent like it did, and it did not break off. But that's not the end of the story. That's merely the beginning. When we did the clutch video last week, I wanted to just kind of isolate just doing a clutch. You know, not everybody's doing a whole tear down. Somebody needs information just on a clutch. In draining the oil on this machine, it's not black. It's kind of gray. So there is debris, there's filings, if you will. Some of that's clutch material. As hot as those clutches have gotten, they've just kind of deteriorated. So I'm going to take the engine and I'm going to tear it down pretty far beyond what you would just doing a bent valve. And because of that is because the motor oil is not clean, or it's not even normally dirty. It's beyond dirty, and it's got a metal tint to it. And so I don't want to drag this out, because I know everybody's, you know, swipe, swipe, swipe. You know, it's our attention span. But if you look really close, the oil is not just black. It actually has, I don't know, kind of a gray tint to it. It's not terrible. No pieces came out. No chips. Nothing like that. But I just can't see having an engine halfway tore apart and then not inspecting, cleaning the bottom half of this engine before we put it back together. So I want to kind of explain why I made these decisions. Some of the decisions you're going to hear me talk about are cost related. Some of them are time related. Some of them are parts availability related. There's a lot goes into doing, you know, a rehab. It's not always easy. This particular engine, parts of it were only made for 2 years. Other parts were made for about 5 years total. Some parts are shared with the 350D, as in David, four-wheeler. We talk about that on the first 350X. That's actually where we got the cam to save that engine. This engine suffered even worse cam failure. So we're going to go over all of that, but I just kind of wanted to preface this as this is not going to be, I'm not going to ride off into the sunset today. I'm sorry, that's great, but I don't think you necessarily get all the detail in a video like that. I had never ridden this bike. I hope to ride it really soon, but I think to give you all a better understanding of these components, what to look for, how to fix it yourself, I think we've got to slow down a little bit, and we're going to do it in components. We're going to do the head today, and then we'll probably do the cylinder and a hone in another video, and then in the final video, basically we'll have all of our components gone through, and then we can put all the components together and then hopefully ride off in the sunset. So let's get started. So here we've got our rocker box, and this was really a problem. This particular part and I'm going to explain a lot of what I found out, and a lot of this is new information for me as well, and so we learned together on this. This is considered a rocker box. This holds your rockers or your valve train. If you look really close, we talked about how wore out these lifters were. Now, in doing this video and going through this project, I'm told, I have not seen it, but I'm told that you can get replacement rockers, and if you can, that's probably what I should have done. But I didn't know that at the time, so I went looking for this whole part. Cost me 3 weeks. I'll do some more explaining on what happened there. I did business with a company that they took my money and kind of hung me out to dry, and I'm not talking about an individual, I'm talking about an actual company. And I did get my money back, most of it, but I still didn't get a part from them, and that's the story on that. But anyways, this is your rocker arm. You have your intake and your exhaust, and these pads right here are just completely shot. If you were to run this like this, you would wear your cam out. It would not have as much lift. It would just be a big mess. You'd probably have a lot more valve train noise if you were to continue to run this. So by all means, don't run them if they look like this. If you're looking on eBay, I found a couple of good sellers that had good product. I saw a lot of product out there, a lot of parts that need refurbishing, and so here's what that means. You buy this component and then send it off to a professional, like a webcam grinding company, and they will actually rebuild these, which is really cool. But keep that in mind. If you buy this, then you're also looking at another $200 to have these actually welded up and then ground back down. So that's the rocker box, and that's what we learned in that process. So this is the head, this is our culprit. As you see here, this valve is broken off. See how just above the keeper, right at where the keeper line is here, that's what that little line is. It's broken off, kind of at an angle there. And what that was is that rocker arm here was slapping the top of this, slap, 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 and eventually it broke. So because of that, I'm changing all 4 valves because I don't know the condition. What if there's a stress crack in one of these from being slapped? You know, we know this one broke. These could be damaged, even though we can't tell. It's not worth it. For 50 bucks, we'll put new valves in it, and we don't have to worry about that particular problem. Now, that said, I am going to run the original springs. They were probably, you know, they've been beat on a lot, but we know one thing is that there was so much play in the rockers that they weren't really like over compressed or anything. The problem was, and it's kind of interesting if you think about this, the valves have to seal in the head in order to create combustion, right? Okay, so you can't over tighten a valve, because if you did, the valve would be pushed in the down position and you would not create combustion. The bike would not run. So what this problem was is they were too loose. So I'm going to take a chance and we're going to reuse the factory springs. But I do want to go the next step, and there's a part here. It's pressed fit. It takes a special tool to put it in and to take it out. And that is called your valve guide, and that's what keeps the valve straight at the right angle so it can seat on the inside of the valve. You see how flat this valve is? Of course, this is the one that's bent. And see how it's pushed up? It's jammed in there. We're gonna have to knock it out. This is the angle of the valve, and you see that one's flat. This is right where it hit the top of the piston. Just barely hit it. We got very lucky there. So based on parts and availability and cost, I'm going to put new valves in, intake and exhaust. We are going to retain or reuse the original springs and the keepers. I am going to change this valve guide out. I've never done that before, so we're going to do that together. And I've got it in the freezer. I'm going to do a little physics here. This is metal. The guide is metal. The head is aluminum. By putting the guide in the freezer, my plan or hope is that it shrinks and contracts. And when we drive it into this aluminum head, this will be room temperature and it will go in smoothly. That's the plan. So because I don't know if there was any premature wear or the bend in this guide, we're going to change it. I think that's the safest, best place to put our money is there. I did take a polishing wheel and I came through here and I just polished up these surfaces. There is a little galling if you look. It's just a little bit here. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I can't feel it with my fingernail, which of course I don't have any fingernails, but I can't feel it. I can't grab a hold of it with anything. But there is a little galling there. But it's not bad. You know, if you think about it, these two parts should never touch anyway. There should always be a layer of oil, and that's what your cam should ride on. So if we get our oiling right, we shouldn't have a problem there. So here we've got the springs and the keeper and the retainer from when I took it apart, or actually the way I found it in the engine. So what I'm going to do is, like I've told y'all before, we're going to do this and we're going to lay all our parts out on the table. Try to keep everything nice and organized without losing anything. I want to make sure that we get the right guide in place here. So I'm going to disassemble the whole head, and then we're going to tackle that guide, and then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to clean the inside of the head and just do a really good job on this. We're going to run it through the parts cleaner and get it just as nice as we can. All right, so we've got this is a valve guide compressor. It's a pretty inexpensive tool. It's a really big C-clamp. Picked this up on Amazon. I have used it several times. I mean, I've got my money's out of it. I think it was around $27 for this particular tool. In today's day and age, that's actually a really good price. You're probably only going to need to use it once, you know, or for one piece of equipment. So maybe you can go in with a buddy and split it. You know, the cost, you know, but it's one of those tools. If you have it, it's a real lifesaver. Out in the shop, the table is very thin. It's a big piece of plate steel. People ask, what's your table made out of? My real table out in the shop is 1/2-inch plate steel, and that allows me to actually slide this under the table, use the table to catch the bottom of this. Here, I'm going to have to try to get a little tricky. I don't know what we're going to be able to do here, but we're going to try our best to do something. Really, with any mechanical problem, you just got to be careful. You got to don't jump to conclusions. Don't just assume. All four of these valves are bent, but interestingly enough is where they're bent at. One, of course, this one is clearly bent. I mean, we can just look at it. That's our $1 million valve. We'll make a gear shifter or something out of it. I don't know. We'll do something. We're going to keep that one. That's what stopped this engine. But what I was doing, you saw me spin it. I was chucking up each one of these, and you saw they should have just dropped out once I took the keepers off. But two of them didn't. These two opposing corners did not. I actually had to drive them through with a screwdriver and a hammer. And what that was telling me was something wasn't right. This one dropped out no problem. This, of course, the bent one we knew was going to be bad. Both of these had to be pushed out, and the reason being is they're bent right where the keeper's at. And so what I was doing is I was chucking them up in the drill right at the very edge, right at that line where the keeper actually sits, and getting it just as straight as I can. See how it's walking? Yep. So all four of them are actually bent from that rocker slapping them, and they're bent in this upper part of the valve stem itself. It's not bent down in the straight area or the long area. It's actually bent up here where the keeper was, and that makes perfect sense because that's where this one broke. Here's a better look at how it broke. Look how it broke right where the keeper or the retainer was. Sorry if that's too close. So what happened is it was a good call to replace all four of these. All four of them are bent in that last little bit. So that's good. You saw me fumble with this a little bit, and out at the shop I can use the clamp under the table. This surface here is just too slippery. I couldn't get it to bite that way. So what I ended up doing is you have two of these. The kit actually comes, the tool actually comes with several sizes of these, let's call them barrels. And so I took the face of the valve and put on this one, because at one, I knew we weren't reusing the valve. So I put the face of the valve here, and then caught the retainer and the springs on this one, and then compressed it free, not attached to the table. I don't like doing that because it requires both hands. When it's mounted to the table, I can kind of cup it in the event that one of those retainers fly off. I can knock it down, but unfortunately, you do what you got to do. But now we have the head. It's free. We're going to take the there's shims underneath these, and this is how they got their spring pressure at the factory. They as you see, they kind of get on here. We'll have to get those up. The film of oil actually causes a suction. So far, we rolled the dice and we did really, really good. It was the right call to change the valves out. I'm going to pull the valve stem seals. That's what these little rubber caps are. You saw me take one off. That's really it. If you've got an engine that's smoking and it smokes a very specific way, if you let your bike sit overnight and you come out and it first smokes in the morning or when you first fire it up, and then the smoke dissipates and it gets less, this is what's wore out. They're just little rubber seals. There's a little wire ring, spring if you will, that holds it to the valve guide. There's a little lip here on the valve guide. And what that does is that keeps basically an oil-tight seal with your valve. If you've never paid attention to it, that's how it sits on the bike. And so as this runs up and down, a little bit of oil can get in there and lubricate it, but it shouldn't be enough that it goes all the way down. If your bike's smoking, like I said, just on startup, oil is working its way past this seal that's coming down the top of the valve, and it's sitting here or it's dripping down onto the piston. When you fire up your machine, that oil gets burned, creates smoke, goes out the exhaust, and that's why your bike smokes initially. That could certainly be why your bike is smoking when you first fire it up. Those are really cheap, and they come in basically all of your top end rebuilds. You can even buy them separately. They're about $10, I think. The problem with them is you got to pull the valves in order to get to them, and that kind of makes it a little more challenging. But the part itself is really easy to take on and off, and it's not that expensive. All right, so here's our first real look at the head with no valves in it. It looks really, really good. I'm very excited about that. We've got a nice even wear all the way across the seats of the valves. I don't see any imperfections or scoring or anything. I mean, we probably didn't have to pull, well, we did too. Interestingly, is that the right one? It's that one. Everything looks really good. I mean, it really does. I don't see anything out of place. Everything looks good. I'm wondering. Let me see something. Okay. Well, when you buy used stuff, y'all. Anybody tell me anything different you see between that valve guide and that valve guide? Is the flashlight helping or hurting? There you go. See a difference? Is the flashlight helping or hurting? There you go. See a difference? You see those punch marks? That valve guide's been replaced. This one. Which just so happens to be the same one that we're about to replace again. That's interesting. Very interesting. You gotta wonder. You gotta wonder what's going on here. This is the valve guide in question. Well, let's knock it out and let's see what we got to look at. I've never done this before, so we're gonna learn together. Now they make a special tool for this. This is a valve guide installer and remover. And the concept is actually, what's funny is so you don't leave little marks on the inside of them and deform them. They're relatively soft, and if you deform them, then your valve is never gonna slide in there properly. It's gonna burn oil, or it may not work at all. So I actually had to wait. That's why this video took an extra week, is I had to get these in stock, and so now we have them. And they do come in sizes. This is a 5mm, and this is a 5.5mm. That is a snug fit right there. Since we're driving this one out, I'm not worried about messing it up, but I'm kind of learning as I take it apart. So when I put it back together, hopefully we won't mess up the new one. So we're going to use the 5mm, double checking that is the right retainer we want to drive out, and making sure it's got a place to go on the bottom side, that I don't have this 2x4 in here. If you lay this flat on the table, it wouldn't have anywhere to go. You're going to need a pretty good size hammer. I don't know, we'll see. We are moving. Good deal. All right. There we go. It actually went very easy. I was surprised. I don't have a way of checking this. For me, I think this was $13. So cheap insurance. That is the guide. That is the valve that dropped. This is the one we want to make sure that it's correct on. I just felt it was cheap insurance to get it out of there. As you can tell, we're back out in the shop, and the mosquitoes are awful right now, so we're going to work really fast. I've got a nut here. What we're going to do, we're going to weld it. There's a mosquito right there. What we're going to do is we're going to weld it here to the stud. Remember, we're dealing with kind of, different metals. Weld was not going to stick to aluminum, but we still need to be careful with it. We've got a steel nut, and this is a steel bolt. We should be able to weld those together. I'm just going to put something kind of over the top here for splatter purposes. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. A piece of cardboard will be just fine. the garage, and it's nice to go back to the shop. Feel comfortable out there. Right now the mosquitoes are just taking over. It's crazy. So the head turned out really good. You know, see here we got our bolt out. We were able to extract it out. Now I'm going to run it through the parts cleaner here. If you've got a ultrasonic cleaner, they are outstanding. You know what I'm talking about. If you don't have one, I highly recommend one. This is a 6 liter. You know, they measure everything in liters now. I call it 2 gallons, but you know, maybe 6 liters. Somebody do the math on that for me. It's just big enough to put this head in. You can put a ATC 70 gas tank in here. 6 liters is a good size. You can do a lot with it. You can do several carburetors with it. But we're going to let this soak in here for 30 minutes or so, and I'll come back periodically, kind of rotate it, and because what happens is the little nooks and the crannies, the liquid sits in there, and then they can kind of, it doesn't seem to work as well. It seems to be good to move it around. So I like to kind of stir the pot, if you will. And as you see, we had it in there once before, but I needed to weld up. Honestly, I'd forgotten that bolt was in there, so I wanted to get that done so we could clean it again for the final time. I'm just scrutinizing it. I'm just looking it over, making sure I'm not missing anything that might be detrimental to this head. I think we're in good shape. I really do. I really do. So let's get this cleaned up and we will get it back together. We should have everything we need to finish it tonight. So I'm excited about that. It's hot too. There we go. It's very noisy when I turn it on. That is probably the downside. It makes a really high-pitched hum sound. I can't run it. It's not loud enough that you can't be in the room with it, but it is annoying, and it reacts with the camera. So once I turn it on, I'm going to let you try to hear it. You'll see that the noise will get really bad on the camera. But it's not that bad in person. You can certainly sit here next to it and work with it. I think I had a coupon on this one. They was on sale or something. I'm not sure. Amazon. About $117, I think it was. It's been a couple of years old. I'll give you a report on it. I think I've had this one 2 years. I went digital, or excuse me, the manual knobs for the reason on purpose. I was scared that the digital pad would wear out. A lot of times everything starts at 0 and you'd have to beep, 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 beep. You know, raise the temperature and raise your time that you're going to let the machine run. With the knobs, they pretty much stay in one position. It's really not going to wear out except for your timer dial, and I felt that was simple enough that I could replace it if I needed to, or just turn it onto a switch. I don't leave this running unattended per se, so a switch would work for me. I could just have it on and an off, and that would be fine. So here we go. I'm going to turn it on and let y'all hear it. Forgot the radio was on. Probably going to have to cut all of that out. So I've just taken it out of the tank in case I do, and I've washed it off. I've wiped it off. It's very hot to the touch. Not, you know, it's not steaming hot, but it's hot. You don't want to hold on to it. So I am going to let this cool just a little bit. I don't want to have a problem, but I think now would be a good time with it hot like it is. It's expanded as far as it's going to expand. I think now would be the perfect time. There's a little piece of paper towel right there. Just throw that in. Now would be a perfect time to go ahead and put our new seat in. So I'm going to get it out of the freezer, literally. Try to get it as square as you can. Okay, and that's putting in a new guide. Really not that tough. Just it takes some persuasion. A little bit. It is not. Looks good. All right, round 3. Having some camera problems here, so batteries are just going out for no reason. So let's start over. Our head is clean. This engine has 4 valves. You've got 2 intake and 2 exhaust. As you can see, they're different sizes here. That's not always going to be the case. Some engines have the same size valves, some don't. Lapping the valves is basically taking the back of the valve here in mating it to the head surface here, where you see where it's shiny, that's where the actual valve actually sits. The rest of it is non-important really when it comes to sealing, like so. Okay, this valve is cone shaped or bell shaped on the backside, and what you want to be able to do is take that valve, and we want to make this surface and the back of the valve surface as good a match as we can possibly make. Any effort at all, you see I'm just putting my hand underneath here and I'm just bumping these valves. Alright, it shouldn't take any effort at all to cause a valve to move. If you have any binding, any resistance really whatsoever, you need to stop and you need to clean and you need to figure out, I wanted it right and I wanted these valves to just be perfect. Apparently 350Xs have valve train concerns, and so I don't want any issues. So that being said, I went ahead and marked them I1, I2, E2, E1. And what I did, the reason I did that is so I could put them back in the same hole that they come out of. And so one being closest to this chain, timing chain opening, and two being further away. And then if you lay your parts out and such, that kind of helps. You don't have to do a lot of thinking about it. You know, it's just the right side and the left side, the back side, the front side. It's just that simple. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do what's called lapping the valves. Now there's two ways to do this. There's a traditional way where you have a little stick tool and you rub it between your hands and it's got a little suction cup. You've seen them in the stores, and as a kid you didn't exactly know what they were. That's what they're for. And the concept is that you're going to put polishing compound or valve grinding compound on the back side of the valve, and you're going to put it in its hole, and then you're going to take that suction cup, you're going to stick it on there, and then you're going to squeeze or rub your hands back and forth like you're trying to start a fire, and you're going to put pressure onto the valve against the head. And what this valve compound, valve grinding compound is, you can pick this up at any hardware or auto parts store, and or Amazon or somewhere like that if you want. You can put that on there. It's basically the consistency of toothpaste, and so it's gritty. It's a very, very, very fine sandpaper, if you will. And so what it's going to do is it's going to mate the two surfaces. It's going to mate this valve to that seat the best we can possibly get it without taking this to a machine shop. And again, that's what we're doing here. We are trying to save ourselves from having to take it to the machine shop. We want to do a good job, but we want to do, you know, inexpensive as possible. So what I'm going to do is I like to use the drill just because it's quick and it's easy and it doesn't take that long. I'm going to show you how to do one, and then I'll fast forward through the other three not to bore you. So what I do is I'll take the head and I'll turn it up on its side so I can get to the back of the stem here. And as you see, I'll try to put this where you can see it on the camera. I'm going to take the drill and I'm going to chuck up just on the very end of this valve here, and I'm going to spin it, and when I plunge, I'm really not plunging in as much as I'm plunging out and holding, because that's when it's going to have the resistance, and then I'll push in and then I'll come back. And the reason that I do the whole push in and out thing is just so that compound can get moved around evenly. I can count how many strokes I'm giving it. It's a lot like it's a lot like putting a hone on a cylinder. It's kind of the same concept. You are trying to make these two surfaces the best you can possibly get them. You want as airtight and as fuel types or liquid type seal between the two. So because we're starting with a new, and be literal here, we're going to clean all this up, there you go. So I'm putting this valve back in that hole. That's the hole I want it in. I'm going to come in here with my drill, and I'm going to grab just the end of it, just below where the two locks are. Okay, I want to get a good hold on it. I want to get it square. You can plunge the drill out, and if you'll watch on this side, and you can spin it. You want to make sure it spins true. If you've got your drill, cattywampus on there, it's going to spin crooked, and that's terrible. You don't want that. You're going to make it worse than what it is. So if it spins true, which this one is, then I'll just turn it up about half speed. Alright, as 11 strokes. So I'll change the drill direction. And my drill come off. Was anybody counting? How far were we up? think we were at 5. All right, and go the other direction. The other direction. All right. Now I want to be sure that that valve, once it's cleaned up, goes back in that particular hole. So I'm laying everything out just as I'm taking it out. Now if you look at your head, we have a nice polished ring, which this head actually looked really good. But because we're reseating new valves, we needed to lap your valves every time. Okay? So now we've got a nice even surface all the way around. It's nice and shiny, it's consistent. See how this one, even though there was a valve there still has some carbon buildup on it. Well, now we have the nice even no carbon buildup on this one. That's the one we just did. So now we're going to do the next valve. All right, now that your head's clean, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to install your valve guide seals. This is what we talked about earlier. This keeps your engine from smoking on first startup. What that's from is these start to leak and they break down over time, and they let oil down on top of your valve springs, and then that oil finds its way down into the combustion chamber, and then of course you burn that off. Normally once the seal gets hot, when hot oil gets to it, they swell, and that's why your smoking kind of stops. And so if you've got a machine, whatever it is, and it smokes on a first startup in the morning, but then the smoke goes away after a minute or two, more than likely these rubber seals are bad. They're really inexpensive. They're about 10 bucks. They're easy to put on if you already have the valves off. So I'm still giving away 3 tires September 30th, which actually when you watch this, my birthday's right around the corner. It'd be a week from, well, it's coming up, let's say that. But September 30th, I'm giving away 3 tires. I'm drop shipping them from Amazon to whoever it is winning. Right now, there's not a lot of you, so the odds are really good. It's $6 to enter. There's a lot of fine print. Y'all can figure that out. You can look in the description of that video. It's on the home page of this channel. $6 to enter. Send me your address. I'll send you out 2 stickers like we have here, the MrcBuilds and the gold wheel. We're going to send those out. Those are yours for joining. That's what your $6 gets you. The tires is free to enter if you're a member. Read the fine print if you need more information. But that's it. New valves. We retain the springs and the retainers. We clean the head up really good. I think it's going to be fine. I don't see any reasons why this head won't perform like it's supposed to. So that's today's video. Just R&R in the head, getting it ready for the big project or a bigger project. But just remember, tearing down a motor is a big project. I don't care who's doing it. It's a lot of moving parts. Take it in phases, take it in steps. Try not to look at it as one project. Try to look at it as a lot of smaller projects so you don't get overwhelmed. Also, cost. You can break your costs down that way too. Instead of buying all the parts at one time, buy as you go if you need to. Certainly, you know, that makes sense in a lot of ways. Budget plays a big role in our hobbies. So thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing and subscribing. I do appreciate it. Y'all take care. Have a great day.